And we are back, and we had a word from David that apparently Murkrow is the play.
Oh, it's flying away at the moment. We'll put him down. There we go. We can put him up here. So.
It's a good But of course, we heard from our very own David Partington relive and go through his VGC career, and of course transition into commentary, which is always a delight. Very good friend of ours, and we're absolutely thrilled to have him on the team.
I'm thrilled that he was able to play VGC while eating burgers.
Yes! Well. That's a win in my books.
Absolute double win there. Really, really heartwarming story as well of, using some unconventional Pokemon. And I think it's another mention of the 2014 World Championships with Pachirisu coming out as well. So, it's definitely an influential moment. So if you haven't before, do make sure that you tune into the World Championships, because that's where the real history can be made.
Of course. And with that being said, we have reached the stage of the tournament where it's good to actually see where we're currently standing, quite literally, with the current standings, and to see where our trainers are currently at going into this penultimate round 8.
Yeah, we've got some standings in front of you there. I'm really excited to see Alex Soto being 7-0 with a team that's, largely speaking, a Series 1 team.
Yes.
Clearly, players have not been well enough prepared for the same style of hard Trick Room team. And actually, Jonas using it in the previous round really speaks to the strength of Indeedee Armarouge as a core. But, of course, two other players above that, Aurelian and Guillermo, also managing to keep that 7-0 undefeated record.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, of course, quite a few trainers we've already featured on stream. I think Enosh is one of them. We've also seen, naturally, Aurelian, Matt, Ruben Pereira, we haven't. Ruben is one of the trainers that has been playing for a very good amount of time. So being able to actually see him get back in form as well is quite exciting. I'm very curious to see what team he's actually opted to select for. There are a couple of other worthy mentions as well. Victor Medina. Victor is one of the best from Spain. It will be an absolute pleasure to be able to feature him. Every single team he essentially team builds with and he structures is always very well rounded with multiple various modes to absolutely utilize the varying scale of speeds. We were just talking about Jonas having the options of hard Trick Room. You've got the Torkoal, you've got the Chlorophyll accessibility outside of Trick Room. Victor builds in a very similar way.
And I've actually seen a little bit of what Victor's been running this tournament when I was out with the players previously walking around. One of my good friends, Sam Bentham, was playing against him. I think it was round 4, round 5, something like this. And there's some interesting Pokemon on Victor's side of the field, and he's piloting it very well. With EXO at one point, clearly taken one loss, but that's no problem going into the last sort of couple of rounds of the tournament. Looking down, more 6-1s on the screen. Oliver Escalin, a player that is very good, graduated from the seniors a few years ago and has been doing very consistently well in VGC ever since he did graduate. Hippolyte Bernard, a French player that went into the top cut of Worlds last year, so really great to see him doing well. And a player that I haven't seen in the standings for a little while, Nils Dunlop, as well. A very, very good player from Sweden that's able to be taking a bit of a comeback in Series 2.
Yeah, and I think Nils, we've known throughout the past year's formats as well. Very, very solid player. He's got world's competitor. He's always been at the highest of echelon levels when it comes to world's competitors. And we do very quickly should be noting our next pairing, which a couple of the trainers have already been shown on the screen. We have Giacomo Pauselli from Italy versus Aleksandra Cwikiel from Poland.
Right, and Aleksandra is a player that we've been able to feature in quite a lot of regional championships, getting to quite a few top cut positions. So always really nice to see her on stream. She's a very, very good player, very capable of playing the slower game and really making these good progressive plays and not doing anything that puts her in a really bad position very quickly.
Yeah, and I think we're just talking about Niels Dunlop as well as Aleksandra. Last I remember, we did actually commentate over one of their matches. I believe it may have been the top 16 or top 8 back at Malmo in 2020, which was an absolute pleasure to be able to see. And it really paid dividends to Aleksandra's very good understanding and comprehension of the board state and the current trending meta opportunities. And I think Aleksandra has gone out of the way to sometimes actually build something quite different, a bit more niche. And I did see a Pokemon that at this point hasn't had as high of usage, but I am very excited to feature, which is Sandy Shocks.
Oh my god.
Shocking, right?
Yes. And do you know what? I really hope it goes for its Terra type, because if you haven't seen it at home, definitely go home, catch a Sandy Shocks, and give it a Terra.
Give it a twirl.
Give it a twirl, absolutely. Because the little hat that it gets, whatever Terra type it is, does do a little bit of a spin. So I'm excited to see it.
Oh my lord, same here. So of course we will be very excited indeed to check this match out from both of these trainers. We could quickly take a look over to see the actual composition of each of the trainers' teams and kind of try to identify what type of matchup we'll be expecting going into this set. So, Aleksandra, of course, we did mention the Sandy Shocks, followed by the Garganacl, Volcarona, Meowscarada, the Baxcalibur, of course, which just came off from an international championship win, and the Mimikyu, which I am such a big fan of.
Mimikyu is such an interesting Pokemon in VGC because that disguise ability, while it's been it's a little bit less powerful than it used to be, because now it does a little bit of damage to Mimikyu when the disguise gets broken. It's still a very good ability because you prefer to take like a small chunk of your health rather than like all of it. Usually a trade that you're quite happy to make in those sort of scenarios. What I'm quite interested in is the Garganacl coming out from Aleksandra. I don't think we've seen a Garganacl yet on stream, at least certainly not coming to a match. So it'll be interesting to see whether that comes or not. And of course, on the other side of the field, we have Talonflame, Armarouge, Dondozo, Tatsugiri, a combination that needs no introduction in Mousehold and Indeedee.
Indeed. So, given the situation, of course, we've got that core once again appearing, the female Indeedee, Armarouge, paired up with another core, the Dondozo Tatsugiri. So something I've noticed as well, quite a few trainers do actually opt to have multiple different cores just glued onto the same team because they work so well and they offer a different sort of dimension when it comes to the current game state. For example, you may start off with Trick Room, where you have female Indeedee, you have Armarouge, and you just go for full damage, but then you can even have a Dondozo Tatsugiri waiting in the back for the opportune moment where you can all of a sudden leave Trick Room after it does expire, and you just go on the full offensive immediately after.
Right, and that's the thing when you're leading into teams like this, that the lead that your opponent uses, the one that has multiple combinations, is really difficult to predict against, because if you get it wrong, usually these combinations are pretty potent, and usually they do quite a lot of damage quite quickly, and so you have to be able to adapt to them. And it really does stop you in your flow and stop you from being able to just use exactly what you want to be leading, because you have to respect these combinations.
Oh, you most definitely do, and it's quite interesting, of course, where you do need to take into consideration all of these various modes based on where the current game state is. But of course, over on Giacomo's side, we do have a couple of Pokemon that are quite interesting with the item choice as well. I think we have Life Orb on Talonflame. I believe we've seen this before earlier on in the stream. The Talonflame, however, does not actually contain a Protect. It's got Brave Bird, Tailwind, Will-O-Wisp, and Flareblitz.
Right, and going on the offensive using Life Orb, I really like that because, you know, you want to be using the item that you put on your Pokemon to maximal effect, and Talonflame's a Pokemon that wants a lot of support moves, but also has those high base power damaging attacks. Brave Bird and Flare Blitz are both very, very good coverage, and I feel like Talonflame in Series 2 has had to opt for a little bit more of a conservative playstyle with Will-O-Wisp, especially with the advent of Pokemon like Iron Hands coming out onto the field, where it's really difficult to take an Iron Hands down in one turn, but if you burn it, you can kind of like leave it there on the field. In a similar way to in Series 1, we do the same sort of thing with King Gambit, because takes so many hits. You need a way to stop it from just running away with the game.
Well, exactly. You need to try to slow down its momentum. Now, of course, it depends on which type of specific set you would be running on the Iron Hands. We've seen so far the Assault Vest being the optimal choice, at least with regards to today's stream matches. However, we have seen in the past, in previous events during Season 2, Swords Dance variants. We have seen Belly Drum as well, which are really interesting. But they naturally, due to the setup element to that set, it does require redirection or at least some sort of fake out user by its side.
Yeah, it's a really strange position to be in for Iron Hands, because it can be both the supporter and the Pokemon that gets supported. And so, like, it really has a lot of options available to it. But one of the things that really, I think, changes what players do is that Assault Vest item. Being able to patch up a slightly weaker special defensive stats. So, you know, going for that means it's a better supportive Pokemon.
Exactly, and we're going to be seeing a couple of the accomplishments right here from Aleksandra. We've got a Frankfurt Regionals top 4 in 2019, Bochum Regionals top 16, the last time that, of course, we did hold a regional back in 2020 within this location, whilst over on Giacomo's side, a European International Championship top 32 of 2022.
Right, and Giacomo getting that result is actually quite telling for the level of player that he is, because
that's hard.
It is very difficult to achieve, for one, and for two, Dynamax format wasn't particularly forgiving when you made a mistake, and so I would say that looking at this result, Giacomo's fundamentals are going to be very much there, and he's probably not going to make too many mistakes or get himself out of position, because getting started at the very least, or doing well in the VGC 2022 era, requires you to play so carefully, because those mistakes were absolutely game-breaking.
Yeah, really, you had to honestly be very aware of the board state and how to go into each given turn following up. But of course, we do have the team of Aleksandra on our screens. We've got a bit of an insight to the item choice here. Volcarona has Rocky Helmet, something that we did actually see quite common in Series 1 in order to get around the population bomb from Mousehold. Not something that I actually expected, if I'm completely honest. No Protect, and it does have Tailwind with a Water Terra type.
Yeah, and I really like that Tailwind there. That's going to put Meowscarada in a really good position. Meowscarada's fallen out of favor with the VGC community predominantly because Iron Bundle and Fluttermane both have big, super effective attacks and are faster than it, in comparison to Series 1, where Meowscarada was kind of like the fastest thing on the field.
Yeah.
So it does struggle a little bit more now, but I like that Tailwind combination with the Meowscarada. And of course, Sandy Shock's getting that booster energy, not going to be able to outspeed Fluttermane or Iron Bundle that also have the booster energy, but not all of them do. And for those games, the Sandy Shocks is going to outspeed them and do quite a lot of work, I feel.
Exactly. And going into this matchup, of course, we do know that the Psychic Terrain is available on Giacomo's side. I do actually believe we just got confirmation that the Baxcalibur actually does have Icicle Spear as opposed to Icicle Crash. That makes a lot of sense because you've got Loaded Dice as the item, so it would be a bit of a throw, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, definitely. As we go on to Giacomo's side of the field, we get that Indeedee Armor Rouge combination and two potential redirectors there, but what I'm really liking to see here is that Mousehold is carrying the wide lens, the population bomb, and the Terra normal as well, going to be doing so much damage with that Technician ability there. Probably a follow me there to just as an opportunity for it to redirect in a pinch.
I was just going to say, Ben, if I'm reading correctly, that's a Shadow Claw move on the mouse hold, something honestly not common at all.
No, and I really like it actually, because between normal and ghost type coverage, you pretty much have everything covered for at least neutral damage. You're not going to be hitting anything super effective with Population Bomb, of course, and maybe you're hitting the odd thing super effective with Shadow Claw, but the point of Mousehold, especially with these offensive sets, is to be doing lots of damage, and I really like that in combination with Dondozo Tatsugiri, because those Pokemon really like certain things removed from the field before Tatsugiri and Dondozo combine into what can be quite unstoppable force.
A couple of very interesting moves there. I think we saw Aura Sphere being on the Armor Rouge. We saw Giga Impact on the Dondozo, which is something that we typically don't see at all. I personally haven't ever seen a Gigapack being utilized by a Dondozo, but I guess if you want to try to maximize that base power, that is one way to do it.
Right, and actually I really like the idea, because ultimately Dondozo sticks on the field for lots and lots of turns. Once you remove the key threats, something like a Moongus, I would imagine that it's utilized for. Once you remove those sort of threats, Dondozo can just be like, sit there and just say like, okay, yeah, I've got to charge up for a turn, but that's okay. You know, you're not going to be knocking me out anytime soon.
True.
So I really like the application there, especially boosted by that Terra Normal. I'm sure that there's a calculation in there. There's a specific use for that Giga Impact.
There must be, right? And it's got to be against something very bulky that will not go down at all. And Giacomo's like, wait, how can I find a way around that specific Pokemon?
Yeah, because, good neutral coverage is quite difficult to come by in a lot of ways. Usually you have to make a sacrifice either in the supportive moves that you put on a Pokemon, or sometimes just you have to get a particular coverage move in order to be able to be effective in a particular format. So really nice to see normal being one of those things.
Yes, as we're going to be seeing the cute little Meowstic plushie there being utilized. I believe that's a male one as well. Very cool callback. It did have access to Prankster, which I think this format very much misses at this current point. But of course, we are going to be going into this game one right now of round 8. Aleksandra versus Giacomo. Over on Giacomo's side, we're going to be seeing that Choice Specs Tatsugiri next to the female Indeedee, which is a very interesting lead, versus Aleksandra's Volcarona and Baxcalibur, as we do very quickly see that Psychic Seed proc.
Right, and now the Volcarona on Aleksandra's side of the field is probably feeling a little bit threatened. And of course, now it's a little bit mind games, right? Right from turn one. You've got the Baxcalibur that probably doesn't appreciate taking a Choice Specs Draco Meteor. You've got the Volcarona that equally doesn't appreciate taking a Choice Specs Muddy Water. And it's really going to be difficult for Aleksandra to be able to get damage onto Giacomo's Tatsugiri with Indeedee on the field, especially boosted by that Psychic Seed. Baxcalibur being the Pokemon that can really break through, especially if it hits 5 of those Icicle Spears into that Indeedee.
That is something to take into consideration. I think it's a really cool way to get around not only Focus Sash Pokemon, as well as some very bulky Pokemon, such as Indeedee, like you said. We know that they tend to be highly invested in training in regards to their physical defense due to the offset of the enhanced special defense of the Psychic Seed. But we're going to be seeing the Water Terra type Volcarona coming out, using Rage Powder to redirect, and I think Indeedee saw that and got a bit jealous and said, right, I'm going to redirect with my own. Follow me, as the Icicle Spear will come out right now. We actually see the Baxcalibur outspeed Giacomo's Tatsugiri, dealing a 3rd hit, going on to a 4th one right now, bringing it down just below half. Does not successfully get that 5th crucial hit, but we're going to be seeing Muddy Water coming out right now. This normally would be a very powerful move, first of all, if it connects, but second of all, of course, onto the Baxcalibur, which it does. of course it resists due to that dragon typing.
Right, and with Volcarona going for Terra Water, it's not going to be doing too much damage there either. So Aleksandra committing her Terra really early in the game, and that's going to probably pay dividends for Giacomo later, knowing how to react to a particular situation. And of course, looking at the field right now, indeed he's not liking its position. But of course, you could always switch in that Dondozo for Giacomo and have the Tatsugiri join up with Dondozo to really stand in front of both Baxcalibur and Volcarona. There's not a lot of moves that either of those can launch out into the Dondozo that it really cares about.
As you were talking about Dondozo, it seems like you summoned it onto the field. But it has definitely made an entrance. Does get, of course, the boost, the Omni boost, should I say, +2 in all of its stat stages at the current moment. We've got the attack, special attack, defense, special defense, as well as the speed. And talking about speed, we're going to be seeing the Volcarona opt to go for the Tailwind, now further boosting, doubling, should I say, the speed of all of its partner Pokemon, including itself. Glaive Rush does go into the correct slot, but we saw that Dondozo didn't really feel it. Might have gotten a bit tickled by it.
Only just tickled. And, you know, now that the Tailwind's in the field, if Aleksandra does lose a Pokemon, there is that Meowscarada in the back that we've had a little bit of a sneak peek at that will be very good against the Dondozo. Dondozo here can go for Terra Normal, but at the moment its water typing is probably its biggest strength until Meowscarada's on the field. And probably Aleksandra looking to get that on the field as soon as possible as it switches in for that Baxcalibur.
It makes a lot of sense because there's not much that this Volcarona can do damage output-wise, as we see the Overheat was just shrugged completely by the Dondozo, and we are going to be seeing the Earthquake come out. Of course, it will be breaking that Focus Sash on the Meowscarada, not dealing that much damage due to it not being very effective, and the Volcarona actually showing that it does have a bit of investment in its bulk.
It definitely does. I mean, you don't put often Rage Powder on a Volcarona without making sure that it can take a few attacks at the very least. And I'm looking at this Dondozo now thinking like whether it's going to be going for its Terra Normal type here just to avoid a knockout from that Meowscarada Flower Trick. So powerful. We saw so much of it in Series 1 and it's going to be always getting that critical hit and ignoring the defense boost on the Dondozo.
It's definitely not something that you want to see if you're Giacomo right now, because even though some Dondozos can be trained to outspeed Meowscarada, that sort of training is something normally trainers would prefer using in Series 1 due to the lower usage stats of the Meowscarada not being so common anymore. As we're going to be seeing the Volcarona goes for the Rage Powder. It will be redirecting any sort of normal type moves, which I think we know very well what it's going to be. Knockoff comes out actually from the Meowscarada, does move first, which does mean, of course, it outspeeds, knocks off the Chesto Berry, but Giga Impact. Wow, critical hit. I mean, at this point, no matter how much bulk you invest into that Volcarona, there's no way it's going to survive that.
Not at all. A very, very powerful Giga Impact, but not a position I particularly like for Giacomo in this case because, you know, normally you want to take out a big target before being able to have to, you know, pause for a turn and recharge. As it stands, now you've taken away all of your resistances to basically any attack here. The Dondozo is going to be able to be knocked out by the Meowscarada Flower Trick, even though it's not super effective anymore. And that means that the Tatsugiri on this turn is going to be vulnerable to the Baxcalibur Glaive Rush. So I really like the way that Aleksandra has positioned herself in this match.
It makes a lot of sense as we are going to be seeing the Flower Trick dispatch very quickly of that Dondozo. Does pick up the KO, will be leaving the Tatsugiri all on its lonesome, unfortunately. Subject to that Glaive Rush, of course, it does get KO'd, leaving Giacomo now down to his final 2 Pokemon versus Aleksandra's 3.
Right, and yeah, that's going to be a pretty difficult situation. We know that the Indeedee has taken some hits. There's no Tailwind on the field for Aleksandra, so Indeedee and maybe Mousehold wouldn't be able to do a little bit of work here. And certainly the Mousehold with a Population Bomb is strong enough to be able to break through a lot of Aleksandra's team. But there's a lot of team to break through, and a lot of Pokemon on Alexandra's side of the field can take key knockouts quite easily. We haven't seen the last Pokemon that Alexandra has brought to the game, so if it is that Mimikyu, for example, Mousehold's not in a great position having to rely on that Shadow Claw. If it's Garganacl, Population Bomb nor Shadow Ball are going to really do too much work, and all Alexandra needs to do is knock out that Indeedee this turn, which goes for the follow me, so it's likely to get attacked.
It is, and it's quite interesting to see two redirection user Pokemon right next to each other there, one potentially supporting the other. Population Bomb, however, does come out, will, of course, be picking up the KO. It's very hard to miss with Wide Lens as an item on it, if I'm completely honest. Very, very minimal chance. It deals so much damage, especially with that Technician in play. But Icicle Spear deals one hit, deals a second hit. The fourth hit doesn't look like it's going to pick up the KO, so it may need a fifth one. Will it get it? It does not. And the Mousehold is able to survive on barely any remaining hit points.
Right, and Alexandra probably didn't want that Pokemon to not be knocked out. Let me do that English slightly better. I don't think Alexandra wanted to reveal her last Pokemon there and wanted the knockout from the Icicle Spear onto the Mousehold. Just to reveal, not reveal any more information. With the open team lists, players are able to see what their opponent options are, but that doesn't mean that they get all of the information, because the 4 Pokemon that get taken to any particular game are not necessarily shown.
Exactly. So in this situation, just wanting to play the safe sort of strategy, even though there's not a lot of reason. Maybe the idea would be in case Play Rough does miss, because we know that it has a chance to, and just wanting to absolutely seal in this game 1, of which Alexandra has done quite triumphantly. I think there are a couple of things of concern. From Giacomo's side, we had that normal Terra-type Giga Impact Dondozo. Of course, picking up the KO with a critical hit. I don't think the critical hit mattered, if I'm completely honest, onto the Volcarona. However, it just wasn't enough, and it put that Dondozo into a position where it was just stale for one turn. It couldn't do much at all, and it just absolutely opened up the field for Alexandra to perfectly position herself in order to get rid of 2 Pokemon within one turn.
And I think the thing that really caused a lot of problems for Giacomo and was really in Alexandra's favor was that Terra Water on the Volcarona. If it wasn't Terra Water, and let's say for argument's sake it was Terra Fire, it would have been a completely different game, because it would have been a Wave Crash knocking it out, and maybe the Tatsugiri in the start with its choice specs would have been able to do a lot more and stop that redirection. A lot of Giacomo's team, aside from the Indeedee Armarouge, are only able to attack one Pokemon at a time, and that's, I think, the real problem that Giacomo needs to overcome going into Game 2.
I think you raise a very good point, because that sort of forced Giacomo to normal Terra type there with the Dondozo, because he had no other way to shut it down. Like you said, if it remained with the Fire typing, not only Wave Crash would be great enough to dispatch of it, but we had the Earthquake pressure too, where that could have been further utilized, but unfortunately we saw the very minimal damage that it dealt onto the Volcarona.
Right, and looking at going into Game 2, I really want to see the Indeedee Armarouge combination come out. I want to see Mousehold a little bit earlier as well, actually thinking about how that game went. And maybe leave the Dondozo Tatsugiri at home, especially facing down a Meowscarada. I feel probably more confident, especially seeing the speed interactions in that game. That the Mousehold will be able to do a lot of work against, say, the Meowscarada. It's going to do a lot of work against Baxcalibur, certainly, and maybe a better use of that Terra type.
As we are going to be going straight into Game 2, everybody. Dondozo and Mousehold straight off the bat from Giacomo's side versus the Volcarona and Baxcalibur from Alexandra. So we actually see the Dondozo opted for the lead. I think Giacomo maybe not as satisfied with the previous lead. I think it was Tatsugiri. It's very strong with its choice specs when Muddy Water does connect, of course. However, it's the speed interaction as well. It was essentially it moved immediately after the Baxcalibur, which was able to outspeed it and deal really good amounts of damage.
Right, but now this Mousehold coming out in the lead is going to be doing a lot of work. Volcarona is going to be carrying that Rocky helmet, so it's going to be quite difficult for Giacomo to use Population Bomb against it.
Yeah.
And now Terra Water on the Volcarona is still going to be a threat, and that's, I guess, why the Tatsugiri is coming in for that mouse hold and giving Dondozo the boost. I would love to see like a Terra Normal this turn and just a Giga Impact into the Volcaronas. Like, that was the problem. Let's take it out.
Wait a second, Ben. What have you done?
I'm waiting. All right, you go.
No, it's the Volcarona. Although there's a case to be made, but no. I think because of the fact that we had the Commander ability come into play there, likely the Dondozo would be outspeeding, which means that its animation of Terra type would be going first. However, we see the Baxcalibur going for that Protect. Volcarona now in its water Terra type, once again showing why it is likely to be very tough for Giacomo to handle and pick up any sort of KO. However, it did look like it dealt a tiny bit more damage than it previously did. Perhaps a damage roll to take into consideration there, whilst Volcarona, once again, does set up the Tailwind.
And I think this is a really good example of a position where Giacomo needs to take this slow. Giga Impact, I think, was the downfall of Giacomo in the previous set because it allowed Meowscarada and Tailwind to get in. Now, Aleksandra doesn't seem to want to leave the Meowscarada in the back and just wait for that positive momentum swing of a knockout. Excalibur leaving the field in favor of it, but equally, you need to be knocking out that Meowscarada as quickly as possible.
Exactly, as we're going to be seeing the Volcarona going for the overheat, dealing, at this point, what should be called chip damage. It's so minimal. Earthquake, however, does come out from the Dondozo, breaks the Focus Sash and picks up the KO.
That is a big critical hit.
Wow, that is so important right now because all of a sudden you had the redirection option being on the field for Aleksandra absolutely gone, as well as the terrestrialization utility.
And doing it without proccing the Rocky Helmet as well is a great thing to be able to do. Just giving that Dondozo that extra little bit of hit points that it needs. At the moment, though, it does need to Terra Normal if it's going to be able to survive a Flower Trick. We saw the Meowscarada go for a knockoff in the previous set, knocking off that Chesto Berry and stopping any HP recovery with its rest. So maybe thinking that it's better to just leave it sitting on the field, going to sleep, because it needs to recover its hit points. At the moment, though, there's only a couple of turns of Tailwind left for Aleksandra, so she's going to have to decide on how best to remove this Dondozo from the field, because right now, it's at a high amount of health.
It really is, but I think the really nice thing about Overgrown Meowscarada is the fact that, sure, you got the Focus Sash, but you're sort of incentivizing your opponent to deal a bit more damage without them being 100% aware that you will start entering the Overgrow range, and you're going to start being able to deal even more damage with that Flower Trick, which could really prove to be quite detrimental.
A Protect coming out from the Meowscarada, not taking any damage this turn, and a Baxcalibur follow-up with a Glaive Rush, doing a little bit of damage, but Meowscarada cleverly protecting from that Giga Impact. So Dondozo not able to take out the Meowscarada threat this turn, but equally not going for the Terra.
I think not going for the Terra because maybe you're trying to preserve it in the back whilst trying to ensure that at least you pick up a K on the Meowscarada without allowing it to trigger, enter the Overgrow range, because you're really respecting the Meowscarada. Makes a lot of sense because Baxcalibur can't really deal as much damage as we saw onto this Dondozo.
No, I think, a Giga Impact is not going to be worrisome at all. It's only Earthquake that would put that Meowscarada into the Overgrow range, but it's likely to attack before that's actually a factor here. So, yeah, not too worried, I don't think, about Giacomo being able to go for sort of less damaging attacks here that would cause that Meowscarada to be more of a threat.
Exactly, and I think that was a bit of a read from Giacomo in the previous turn, expecting perhaps a knockoff once again into that slot as opposed to a flower trade, which we actually see in this current turn as the Dondozo did finally normal Terra type, Glaive Rush and knockoff, though not quite enough to pick up the KO onto the Dondozo, which will go ahead and dispatch of its Giga Impact. Most definitely did not need the Terra type there to pick up a very frail Meowscarada and get that KO. Tailwind does now peter out, and all of a sudden, Aleksandra is down now to her final 2 Pokemon, whilst Tailwind is no longer active.
And now it's the Garganacl on the field, so we are going to be seeing it in this game. Baxcalibur in a prime position to be able to just launch out another Glaive Rush into the Dondozo. Maybe even Icicle Spear, probably a little bit more consistent than Glaive Rush, but I'd be worried if I was Aleksandra that the damage just wouldn't quite be there. And Glaive Rush is just that much more powerful than Icicle Spear. And of course you want that Garganacl to be able to get the Salt Cure on the Tatsugiri this turn so that it can concentrate on playing defensively in the next couple of turns.
Exactly. So time is running down right now. We do, of course, see the Dondozo must recharge in this turn due to the Giga Impact from the previous. Critical hit, Glaive Rush does pick up the KO. I'm not sure if it was needed at that point. Dondozo was relatively low with its HP, but like you mentioned, Ben, we do see Salt Cure targeting that Tatsugiri will start getting that very, very good damage dealt at the end of each turn. And due to its water type, of course, instead of, let's say, a 1/8, it is now actually dealing 1/4's worth.
Right, and that's going to be knocking out this Tatsugiri very, very quickly. Really happy to see the Mousehold come out onto the field here. It's going to be very impactful. Probably not enough to be able to knock out this Baxcalibur, but I do have a question as to whether the Tatsugiri stays on the field and utilizes that choice specs to be able to do a lot of damage to even the Garganacl or the Baxcalibur, and just allows the Salt Cure damage to be accrued onto Tatsugiri's health bar.
It's true, because I think it makes a lot of sense. You do have the option of going for Hydro Pump, which could likely pick up the K on this Garganacl if it did not protect. So a double protect from Aleksandra's side of the field means, I think, is very logical at this point, due to the fact that you're able to once again further chip down this Tatsugiri's HP. We see that it has actually locked in to Hydro Pump, and of course we did see the Mousehold try to focus down with that Population Bomb as well.
The question I've got at the moment is the Tatsugiri in Ice Shard range from the Baxcalibur? Because that's going to make a big, big difference about how this turn plays out. There is one more Pokemon in the back for Giacomo, so you know, whether or not it's a good switch in or not in this position. If it is that Indeedee, for example, it is going to cancel out the ability for Baxcalibur to go for anything like an Ice Shard, and that's going to help out this Tatsugiri in the late game, as Tatsugiri does indeed leave the field.
Oh, Talonflame being the new Pokemon of choice here from Giacomo's side. Definitely will not be wanting to see a Salt Cure going into that due to this ×4 weakness, but Population Bomb, 5th hit.
Ooh.
Wow, this looks like if it goes all the way, it'll likely pick up the KO.
Yeah.
We've got 9, and we've got a 10th hit, and it is able to take down the pseudo-legendary Titan, of which this Baxcalibur is. Salt Cure does target down that Talonflame. Did want to focus down on it, make sure that at least you could pick up the K on Tatsugiri in case there's any switch-in. And what do you know? The Talonflame just came to say hi and bye.
Definitely bye. And if it wasn't this turn, it was definitely going to be next turn. So we do end up in a situation with Garganacl versus Tatsugiri Mousehold. And this is where the Mousehold gets to shine, because there is that follow me tech onto this more offensively driven Mousehold, and that will allow the Mousehold to take those Salt Cures over and over again and allow the Tatsugiri to launch out those inaccurate water-type moves onto Garganacl and probably be able to take a knockout, if not this turn, the next turn, and if not next turn, the turn after that.
It makes sense, right? And given the situation, we've got Follow Me from the Mousehold. It does come out. It wants to redirect Hydro Pump. Does, of course, meet that protect. So we said, Ben, that Tatsugiri just needs to connect with his hydro pumps at this point, right? If you're able to do that, you're able to pick up the KO. Aleksandra no longer has access to terrestrialization, as it was used up on that Volcarona, which previously, in previous turns, did actually get critical hit KO'd.
Yeah, and it's a really nice thing that Giacomo's got the ability to use the Tatsugiri without the Dondozo. Dondozo did, exactly what it needed to do, and I think this is speaking to how Giacomo has built his team, using that Tatsugiri in the end game, as well as the other offensive Pokemon he has access to. And we get the first avoid here on the Garganacl. Technically, Aleksandra is very easily able to take this game. The other thing, actually, I want to call out at this stage is, depending on how many misses we get in a row, there's also PP to be taken into account, and we'll see if Giacomo has used all of their PP ups or a PP max onto that Hydro Pump, because at the point that the Tatsugiri on Giacomo's side of the field is going for a struggle, it's definitely going to be Aleksandra's game.
And you can tell that Aleksandra is more than aware of it, right? Being able to keep that cycle of Protect, Soul Cure going enhances the chances of this Tatsugiri's Hydro Pump PP to actually get wasted, because even if, for example, you do have a PP max, the maximum that you can reach is 8. So as long as you retain that cycle and you have the capability of recover later on, that's pretty good.
I think, if I'm counting correctly, that's 4 Hydro Pumps that the Tatsugiri has used so far in this match. Ooh. And it won't get to the end. Oh! It's going to be a one-hit knockout there. Hydro Pump connects with the Garganacl, and it will be the second game to Giacomo, and taking this set to 1-1.
Yeah, and what a comeback as well. There's a lot of different factors to take into consideration there. I think, like we said, there's the RNG out of the Hydro Pumps missing as well to take into consideration. If they missed at least 2 more times, or maybe 1 more time, and you have the cycle of the Protect play from the Garganacl, all of a sudden, you're in a very bad situation if you're Giacomo.
You are, and that's going to be something for both of these players to be aware of going into Game 3. And a really interesting position to be in for the adjustment going into the final set of this match. The one thing I really liked about this set was the ability for the Mousehold to get that population bomb on Baxcalibur. And now both of these players know just how powerful that is. And it's definitely something to be aware of. Both games so far, Aleksandra has led out with the Volcarona Baxcalibur. So looking at the teams, Costa, how do you think Giacomo can best take advantage of that consistent lead Aleksandra's leading?
I think there could be an option of even going for Trick Room. I think the Armor Rouge does call out to me a bit, if I'm completely honest. Something you need to take into consideration, as I believe Giacomo has already been doing so, is that Meowscarada. But I would really like a bit more offensive pressure out from his final 4th Pokemon. We've seen, I believe, 2 games in a row. Naturally speaking, Dondozo did an impact. There's a lot of offense to ask for, right? But I think the Talonflame there was absolutely, useless, because it just, the only use it had was the switch in, allowing the Tatsugiri to switch out, which did prove to be really, really nice from Giacomo, but he really does have to take into consideration the adaptations from Aleksandra. Aleksandra may just go for the same lead, but something that I would really like to see would be perhaps a Sandy Shocks, but it doesn't make a lot of sense for Sandy Shocks unless you try to Grass Terra type it.
Right, and I think the big question there is, if you are bringing the Armor Rouge, are you bringing the Dondozo Tatsugiri anymore? Yeah. And I quite like the idea, actually, thinking about it and thinking through that the Dondozo stays at home, but the Tatsugiri still comes into the battle, because depending on how it's been trained, it's certainly going to be underspeed in the Meowscarada. If Aleksandra goes for the Tailwind again, and we go for a Tailwind scenario, then that choice specs Tatsugiri is going to be looking really nice to put on offensive pressure. We've already seen how it can one-hit knockout, get a one-hit knockout onto the Garganacl. and presumably it can with the Baxcalibur with a Draco Meteor. So there's a lot of good offensive options in that Tatsugiri. It doesn't necessarily need that Dondozo to be able to have a good footing in this match.
And it makes sense, right? Because Tatsugiri, the Drippy form, of course, actually has a Steel Terror type, which isn't something we commonly see. Being able to resist any Grass-type moves coming out, which, naturally speaking, we've got the Water Dragon types, which are neutral for that Flower Chick going into the slot. So being able to apply a resistance at least adds a tiny bit of damage mitigation into that scenario.
Right, and the Steel type is going to be able to allow it to stand in front of the Baxcalibur a little bit easier, but it does make it more difficult in front of that Volcarona. And it's the Volcarona that's so difficult for Giacomo to be able to deal with. We saw the actual critical hit coming out from Giacomo's side of the field to knock out the Volcarona with the second Earthquake. And without that knockout, it was really quite difficult, I think, for Giacomo to be able to break through it quickly enough to be able to do and execute his strategy.
And once again, there's a lot of different factors going into this. We have just been told that both of the trainers are in the process of resetting up at the moment, but in the meantime, I think from Aleksandra's side, I really want to see the Sandy Shocks. I know it's not going to come, but I really want to see it.
Well, I don't know. The Dondozo has come to both games so far, and Sandy Shocks is a Pokemon that would be able to outspeed the Dondozo with that booster energy as well. So, there's opportunity for the Sandy Shocks to maybe attack it on the switch-in, get those powerful electric moves off, but in combination with the Meowscarada carrying the Focus Sash, I wouldn't be surprised if a Thunderbolt followed by a Flower Trick would be enough to either, maybe not knock it out, but bring it pretty close and bring it to a range where a follow-up Thunderbolt would be able to knock it out. If that was the case, that means Meowscarada probably still has the Focus Sash in play. So I actually quite like it.
It is Grass Terror type as well, right?
Right, it's Grass Terror type as well, so it can be played defensively in the same way that Volcarona was.
Yeah, and it could prove to be quite good of a strategy. I think Aleksandra, naturally speaking, relying on the Water Terror type Volcarona makes a lot of sense. You've got that redirection and that utility in order to enable your partner Pokemon. And it was quite unfortunate because do we think that the critical hit in Game 2 changed the flow of the outcome of that match?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's unfortunate to say because, there are times where there's a critical hit and it kind of could swing one way or the other, especially if it happens early. It really does change the flow of quite a lot of turns after that. We saw I don't know, maybe 10 turns afterwards, but only because the Garganacl was protecting every other turn. So,
stalling,
but for the next sort of 3 or 4 turns, it allowed Giacomo to have a lot more room that wouldn't otherwise be available. I think, if the Earthquake didn't get the knockout on the Volcarona, you'd have to kind of Earthquake again or maybe go for a direct attack of the Giga Impact onto that Volcarona, maybe even a Wave Crash. But at that point, you're taking Rocky Helmet damage, you're taking Wave Crash recoil, and there's still a Meowscarada getting a Flower Trick going on your side of the field. So I think the critical hit really changed the way that game played out and definitely was probably one of the most impactful turns for Giacomo's game in Game 2.
Yeah, because the set itself sort of incentivized, or should I say, maneuvers the move that Giacomo had to go for. Opting for Earthquake means that you do not go for Wave Crash into Volcarona, obviously because it resists it, but more importantly because it's a contact move. Earthquake is not a contact move. You're at least able to avoid that and not accept that additional bit of damage.
Right, and while the Tailwind's up, you do have a good amount of speed advantage. Actually, something that I'm realizing now that I'd completely forgotten from Series 1 that we probably need to address is that Meowscarada outspeeds Dondozo without the Tailwind. So the Tailwind was instrumental, I think, in being able to allow the Volcarona to just get off those little bits of chip damage. But I think it was most instrumental in allowing the Baxcalibur to get those extra glaive rushes onto the field before Dondozo could do anything about it.
Yeah, because realistically, there's not a lot that... glaive rush, naturally, after Baxcalibur does use it, any attack that is targeted into that slot will be dealing double the amount of damage that it normally would. So there is a situation that the Earthquake perhaps may have picked up a KO because it's sort of kind of trying to treat it as if it's super effective, or at least a similar effect, because it's a very strong Pokemon at +2.
It really... I think you've definitely hit the nail on the head there.
Did I? I wasn't sure if it came across.
I think so a little bit. But, yeah, I mean, going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of switch-ups for Game 3, I really do think that the Armarouge is going to be the Pokemon to look out for going into Game 3 of this, because looking at Alexandra's team again, it's only the Meowscarada that really is able to resist expanding force. Obviously, there is the wide guard ability on the Garganacl, and that's going to make a big impact into what Giacomo is going to be able to do. But
a Giga Impact. I had to.
It's just absolutely absolute Giga Impact. So so the expanding force may not be able to be used every turn, but because of the Aura Sphere that's on that Armarouge, when Garganacl goes for Wide Guard, if Armarouge goes for Aura Sphere, it's not going to be able to take too many of those before being knocked out there. So we had a few technical issues, unfortunately, but we are back to our players now, and they are getting set up for Game 3. We've talked about it quite a bit, Costa,
quite extensively.
We'll have to see what these players are thinking, whether they agree with us or not.
They will show us in due course. So we will be going straight into Game 3. Same lead from Giacomo's side, accompanied by Aleksandra with the Mousehold and Dondozo versus the Baxcalibur and the Volcarona. Are we thinking that this Volcarona may be tempted to yet again terrestrialize into the water type here?
I feel like it's likely. I mean, the fact that it causes so many problems for the Dondozo on Giacomo's side of the field makes it really hard not to press those particular buttons. Question I've got is whether this is a Terra Normal Giga Impact coming out here.
It may well be. We can definitely confirm the Tatsugiri is in play right there, hopping straight into Dondozo's mouth, being able to give it that commandeering Omni Boost, which it so desires and craves for. So the question is, like you said, are we going to be seeing a terrestrialization? And I think that confirms it. That's a different trainer avatar.
Yes, here it is, the normal Terra coming out for the Dondozo, getting that jewel on its head and boosting the power of its Giga Impact here. Terra Normal coming out from the Volcarona is going to be Terra Normal? Terra Water coming out from the Volcarona. I'm too caught up on this Dondozo here. Like, all of its Giga Impacts is just getting my head spinning at this late stage of the tournament. Baxcalibur going for the Protect, not going to be taking any damage this turn, and Giga Impact does land onto the Volcarona. Will it be a one-hit knockout?
Surely, and it is indeed. There we go. That is the showcase that we have all been looking for. Absolute stunner of a turn 1 play there.
Both of these traders have had so much time to think about how they're going to approach this match, and I think Giacomo was sitting there like, I've got to Giga Impact it. I've got to Giga Impact it.
I've got it. I might as well use it.
Can I Giga Impact it? I've got to Giga Impact
it. Should I? I should.
You definitely should. And that's worked out so well for Giacomo. So props to him for bringing that excitement to this Game 3 of round 8.
As we're going to be seeing Flower Trick going into this defenseless Dondozo, will be followed up, of course, by the Baxcalibur. We did see the interaction where the Dondozo is faster than Baxcalibur due to the fact that there is no Tailwind that has been set up or will be set up for the rest of this set. 5 hits from this loaded dice Icicle Spear Baxcalibur. Not quite enough to pick up the KO. However, we've discussed this and we've mentioned already, this Meowscarada can outspeed.
It can indeed. I'm glad we got that out there as the Flower Trick does go into the Dondozo, picking up the KO. The Giga Impact was fantastic, but I'm afraid it's the last one that we're going to be seeing in this set. Glaive Rush following up onto the Tatsugiri is easily enough to pick up a one-hit knockout, and now it's down to Giacomo's final 2 Pokemon.
It's a 3 versus 2 advantage for Aleksandra, as we are going to be seeing Giacomo bring in that Mouse Hold once again and the Talonflame, which is not necessarily bad in this scenario. However, it's something that I think Gardenator will be very happy to see if it is in the back.
Right, and I think the impactful thing here is that Meowscarada is unlikely to be able to... the Mousehold is unable to be able to outspeed the Meowscarada without that Tailwind boost coming out from the Talonflame. So we know that it's able to knock out the Baxcalibur. That means it's going to be able to knock out the Meowscarada very, very easily. And so it's a difficult turn here because both of the Pokemon on Aleksandra's side of the field can probably knock out that Mousehold in one.
So which slot is the real question? However, there... no Tailwind and no Will-O-Wisp from the looks of things, which will mean Flower Trick deals a very good amount of damage, but it doesn't actually pick up the KO. Population Bomb targets down the Baxcalibur. That must... Wow, no critical hits needed. Just absolutely smashed it. I'm not sure what kind of energy boosts were ongoing there, and how was able to... was it perhaps Glaive Rush's effect that was still in play from the previous turn? Because that was too much damage, Ben.
I was thinking, like, hang on a second, we haven't got any attack boosts. Like, how is this Mousehold doing so much damage? And yeah, you're absolutely right there. Great call, Costa, and it is the Glaive Rush effect, doubling the damage after the attack has been used. Now the Will-O-Wisp has failed onto the Meowscarada. Now there's some conversations about, like, getting the Tailwind up, whether the Meowscarada goes for the Protect or not. And of course, there is the Sucker Punch, I believe, on this Meowscarada. Yes, it is confirmed there is a Sucker Punch there that the Mousehold will likely be knocked out for. So looking at like a really uphill battle here for Giacomo in this game state.
It really is, and I think it's quite unfortunate to see that Will-O-Wisp miss, as it would have both broken the Focus Sash, it would have reduced the damage output of this Meowscarada, and it would have set up a potential Brave Bird KO in the subsequent turn. But we're going to see a Protect there from the Meowscarada. It is going to be able to protect itself from that Will-O-Wisp. Shadow Claw being such a cool utility move coming out from that Mousehold does break Mimikyu's disguise. Takes a tiny bit of chip damage. However, we're going to be seeing the counterplay of Mimikyu picking up the KO and getting a tiny bit of further Life Orb recoil.
Right, and this Mimikyu has access to Shadow Claw. Meowscarada has access to Knockoff as well, both of which are going to be doing significant damage to the Talonflame. And the problem with Talonflame in this position is that every attack that it launches out onto the field does also cause recoil. So Talonflame will be able to get Meowscarada down to its Focus Sash this turn if it wants to, but it's going to have to take a lot of health to do that. Will-O-Wisp coming out from the Talonflame, burning the Meowscarada finally, and stopping it from doing quite as much damage with this Knockoff.
Third time's a charm, apparently, as we're going to be seeing. Knockoff does get rid of Talonflame's Life Orb there. At least the Talonflame will not be able to incur as much recoil as it would normally through the Brave Bird recoil in combination as well. However, I think it may just well be a little too late unless we get multiple critical hits, but then there's always Sucker Punch to take into consideration.
There is indeed, and that Shadow Sneak available for the Mimikyu as well, but it is a Shadow Claw coming out from Aleksandra's Mimikyu, and Aleksandra takes the set 2-1, guaranteeing her position in the Day 2 Swiss tomorrow. So a great way to go 7 and 1.
I believe it is indeed 7-1 because both of the trainers, if I'm not mistaken, were at 6-1, and we will be entering round 9 later on. So huge congratulations to Aleksandra for the stellar performance, as well as the really cool showcase of the strategies she was able to display for us during this match. Unfortunately, I'm a bit upset at her. There was no Sandy shocks, which I'm still very, very upset about, as you can tell.
We might see it tomorrow, Costa.
I hope.
We might see it tomorrow.
Please.
But in the meantime, Aleksandra is going to be able to secure her position in Day 2 Swiss, where, of course, one more win needed for Giacomo. And what a great set there between these two trainers. I'm really happy that we managed to see a Giga Impact coming out from the Dondozo, a really lesser used move there. And clearly it's done well today, getting to an X&2 record going into round 9. Only one more win needed for Giacomo to become victorious and make it to that all-important Day 2 Swiss.
It's very impressive. I think it's quite unprecedented. I don't think anyone had been calling out Giga Impact. There may have been that one person on social media at the beginning of Series 1 that said, hey, I wonder what a normal gem Giga Impact on Dozo with Commander ability Omni Boost would do to a Pokemon, and I think we saw that on display. It would absolutely pick up the KO on a lot of bulky Pokemon because normal type as a whole, it hits neutral to most types, unless of course there is an immunity or maybe a resist, such as, let's say, the rock typing.
Right, and that Garganacl would have been the perfect counter to it. But, of course, Garganacl gets hit with Wave Crash, so not the answer that you really want to Dondozo there. But, yeah, really nice to see the way that both trainers are using Pokemon that have not been as popular or using them in a way that other players haven't been so far. I just really want to shout out both Sandy Shocks, obviously, you know, we can't not while we're here, but also the Meowscarada because, yeah, like we said during the match, it's a Pokemon that hasn't been really used all that often in Series 2. It was everywhere in Series 1, and then Fluttermane and Iron Bundle just said, you know what, we're the fast guys now.
Pretty much, and it's quite impressive. Meowscarada, just going to show its value, not with, for example, the protein ability, which in previous formats has been so powerful in usage. I think we saw Cinderace during Sword and Shield, and combination of Dynamax, of course, easily going ahead and being such an offensive threat, but it did receive a nerf right now where it's only bound to that one moment and state where it's still on the field. It needs to switch out if it wants to utilize that ability activating once again. But Overgrow being a very good set, it takes advantage of the Focus Sash in a brilliant way in combination with the Flower Trick that always lands a critical hit.
And we'll have to learn some more from Aleksandra herself as we have her set up on the couch ready to be interviewed. So we're going to be throwing over to David Partington and hearing a little bit more about Aleksandra's run through the tournament and her team.
And we are back with the winner of that round 8 and who has now made it into that Day 2, Aleksandra. How are you feeling?
I feel great, especially since I remember I was here 3 years ago for Bochum Regionals and I also did very well. So I'm glad that I basically cut both Bochum Regionals back to back. I mean, I made it to Day 2, sorry.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive as well. And, like, with also a pretty cool team, by the way. Like, I think a lot of us were hoping to see the Sandy Shocks come, but even still, Meowscarada, which is completely unseen now in Series 2, is also really cool. So, kind of, what was the inspiration behind the team?
Actually, I played in an online tournament, and my friends told me about this team that completely destroyed him. It was used by an American player. I think his handle is Costa, and I wanted to make a prank, and I used this team against him, and he was pretty upset at me. But I found out that I really enjoy using this team, so I decided to just make a few tweaks. I actually tested a bunch of different things, like Arcanine instead of Corona. Like I also tested Glimora instead of Garganacle, but in the end I went with the basically the same version that was used by this player, except I just tweaked the stats a little bit in a few places.
Awesome, and it seems to have really kind of paid off for you as well.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing a lot of people haven't really kind of prepared for what you've kind of come across against. But what did you think when you saw the Dondozo and like terastallizing to the normal type, and then especially going for those Giga impacts?
I was a little bit afraid because my usual plan for Dondozo involved using Sandy Shocks and Miascarada in the back. But this being a normal type, I thought Sandy Shocks wouldn't do very well here. That's why I didn't bring it to my games. And I also underestimated how strong the Giga Impact was, because I didn't expect it to KO my Volcarona. It's pretty physically bulky, so I expected that it would survive, but it didn't. And I never seen anything like that before. I think it's actually very cool idea. I really like it.
Yeah, but you were able to turn the tides on it even after that critical hit in Game 2.
Yes. The critical hit Game 2 was kind of upsetting, but I still thought that I maybe had a chance to turn it around with Garganacle if the Tatsugiri missed the Hydro Pumps, but it didn't quite work out. I actually bought Garganacle because I expected that my opponent would switch up his strategy, like bring Armarouge to try to like switch things around, not do the same thing. And after the game time, I realized that he would rather stick with this game plan. So I bought Mimikyu again. I think it paid off.
Yeah, it sounds like it really did. So congratulations, Aleksandra, on your awesome win. Any final shout-outs you want to give?
I like to give some shout-outs to my friends from Polish BGC community who helped me prepare, especially my friend Susyko, who also used a Dondozok team. And so I could prepare very well for this matchup. And also to my fiancé, Marcin, who's a TCG judge.
Congrats.
Yeah, on this regionals, exactly. And of course to the American player who I bought this inspiration for this team, right?
Well, thank you to all of those players especially, and congrats to you on making to Day 2 tomorrow. We shall see you tomorrow, but we're going to be shortly up now for round 9, the final round today of our Bochum Regional Championship.